Hello, I'm Jim Miller. Terrence and Reggie have the night off. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. Tonight we're pleased to have with us Sarah Hall. Sarah is the Executive Director of the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts. There's a lot going on at the museum, Sarah, and I'm really excited to hear about it. But can we start with a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've been in the museum field for about 30 years now, which is a big number to say. And it wasn't necessarily, it seems inevitable. My dad was a museum director. He was a natural history museum director. He was the director of the Buffalo Museum of Science. So it seems like it's in my DNA. I certainly love museums. I grew up feeling completely at home in museums. I thought the Triceratops was named after me. And I think there's a part of me that wants every kid to feel the same way I did about museums as magical places of discovery, places where they feel welcome, and places where they feel at home. But I didn't really set out to be a museum director. My background is really writing and film and poetry, and I married an artist. I started working with exhibitions and ended up in 1994. I started working at the Frick Art and Historical Center in Pittsburgh, which some of you may be familiar with, and I was there for nearly 25 years, had about 7 different job titles, ended up running their curatorial department.
What drew you to the position here in Hagerstown?
It was a moment of realizing this is really my career, right? I wasn't a deliberate path, but it was a path that I walked pretty darn well and was really enjoying. And at a certain point, I thought, you know, now is the time to take this career seriously, and what would the next step be? Directing a museum. And my husband reminds me that I always said I wanted to run a small museum where I could do everything. And that's, our museum is not that small, right? We have a staff of 10 full-time and 8 part-time employees, and there's no way I could possibly do everything. But this seemed like the right scale when I was looking for a new opportunity. I understood the story of the museum, which I guess I'll probably talk about in a couple of minutes. It was built with Pittsburgh steel money, essentially. Right. So the Frick obviously has the same kind of lineage and a lot of familiar backstory. So I could understand that. And I looked at it and I said, okay, I've been running a curatorial department with a staff of 5 and a departmental budget of, you know, around $900,000. I could make the step to running a museum with 10 full-time employees and 8 part-time and a budget about $1.5 million. That it seemed like the right scale of a move for me.
Excellent. There's a lot of probably good answers to this question, but what in your mind sets the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts apart from others, either in the region or outside of the region?
You know, one thing I remind the staff, and we talk about a lot internally, is just the word quality. It is an exceptional collection, and whether you love the Norman Rockwell painting The Oculist, or if you are knocked out by the Thomas Moran, which is my personal favorite. It astonished me when I visited the museum for the first time. It's a very, very strong collection, and it puts a certain sense of responsibility on us to continue to do things as well as our predecessors did. That's what makes the museum such a delightful discovery. I mean, people will literally say, you know, we were driving on the highway, it was pouring rain, you know, we decided to exit and we followed the signs to this museum and we could not believe what we discovered. So it's really good quality. Yeah,
would you agree that it is odd for a community our size to have a museum of that stature?
Absolutely. It is highly unusual, and I think there have been some really wonderfully discerning people and predecessors of mine who have made fantastic choices. The Thomas Moran painting that I just talked about, it's called View of Manhattan from Communipaw, New Jersey. It was the first museum purchase, and I think that was 1947. So directors who had really good taste and were really deliberate in the way they chose to grow the museum. And that's a great story too, because the museum was dreamed up over a dinner. I think it was in 1926. The story is that Anna Bruce Singer, who was a local Hagerstown native, she grew up across the street from City Park. She married a Pittsburgh Steel heir, William Henry Singer Jr., who she called Billy. I love that in all their correspondence we read about Billy. And that he was an artist. And he had an exhibition in New York in 1926, and a lot of people from Hagerstown went up to support them. And apparently at a dinner celebrating the opening of his show, the idea floated around. Anna was a pianist. She also she was the social person in that marriage. Billy was very introverted. He liked to be in nature and he liked to paint, and he liked winters in Norway. he didn't mind isolation. He didn't need the stimulation of other people. But Anna was very social, and she had been studying piano. She loved the friendships they had with other artists. She loved collecting art, so the collecting was really her. And she really felt like it was important to bring a sort of cultural center to Hagerstown, to provide opportunities for people in this region. And a lot of the founding documents, they talk about culture in general and not just art. So because of her music background, having concerts in the museum was quite important to her.
I was going to say, the museum, one of the things that I remember as a child when I was taking piano lessons I think I took them maybe for a year, but our recital was, guess where?
Yes.
At the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts. So it's not just about visual arts.
No, and we work really hard to create an integrated experience. So the last couple of years, even for every exhibition we do, we program a community day, which is meant to sort of show this cross-pollination, and it usually has components of music and food and conversation and different ways to pull in sort of simultaneity in different kinds of creative fields.
Highlight for us some of the key pieces or collections. You've already talked about a few.
Sure. The Norman Rockwell, the Thomas Moran. We have a really strong what's called the Hudson River School American paintings collection. That was a really deliberate sort of built up part of the collection through the 1940s and 1950s. We do have an old master collection. A lot of people, I think, know the Schreiber Gallery, which is when they were planning the museum, they called it the Tall Works Gallery. So it's very baronial inside there. And I imagine prior, in the first incarnation of the museum, you walked straight into that gallery. And I often think about how generations, we're at about 7 generations of local families that we have served since opening in 1931 at this point. And I often think about how magical that experience of the Schreiber Gallery is. In the Schreiber Gallery, one of the wonderful paintings is Dutch Baroque artist Gottfried Schelken, the gentleman with the lit candle. I think a lot of people would recognize that painting. We have an amazing little precious Thomas Cole study for the voyage of life. There's just almost too many treasures to enumerate, but all different styles of art from old masters. We say we focus in American art because of that concentrated collecting that happened. We also, I describe the collection often as eclectic. Because we're kind of the only museum for a 65-mile radius, many of the local collectors and people of the region have donated things to us that you might not expect to find. So when we did a show a couple of years ago on Islamic art, and we had analogous pieces of Roman glass from, like the 5th century BC in the collection. So we have a lot of sort of cultural objects that you wouldn't necessarily expect to find. more of a general museum collection than you might expect.
Excellent. So tell me, the collection, not all of your collection is out all of the time, and then you have things, I assume, that rotate in and out. How does that all work? How do you decide?
Sure. Yeah, we have probably about 6,500 pieces in the collection.
Oh.
So, and it's a wonderful story. You know, this museum that begins with a 100-piece donation from the singers, and you know, also that origin story where the city and the county are say to the singers, you know, okay, we will run the museum, we'll support its maintenance and its administration if you build it. But we outgrew that so quickly, so that by 1947, you know, we were buying things like the Thomas Moran. So it's been a story of the community really embracing the museum. And allowing us to grow, which is really wonderful. So how do we decide? It's a jigsaw puzzle, really. So we have, you know, permanent collection galleries, which are installed. Generally, we have a narrative called American Narratives, logically enough, that goes from about 18th century to the mid-20th century, kind of telling a story of American art. We have the Singer Gallery, which tells the story of the singers and their collecting interests. We have the Schreiber Gallery, which really highlights our old masters. So that leaves 2 temporary exhibition galleries that we're programming. And there are some things we do regularly that are beloved. For example, our Cumberland Valley Artists exhibition just opened last Saturday. We do that, you know, every year. We do the Cumberland Valley Artists and we do the Cumberland Valley Photographers to showcase and support regional artists. And we do the Washington County Public School exhibition every year, which
I've been to several of those.
They're just completely delightful and full of joy.
And we have some amazing young artists.
We do.
We really do.
We get, you know, no matter what we do, our highest attendance of the year is for the elementary part of that show. I mean, so many, you know, extended families come to see the kids work. But a lot of people tell us, you know, we don't have children, but we just find this a pure delight.
Well, and the children have to be, I mean, when they see their work hanging in a museum of that stature, that's got to be an amazing, that's something they have to remember a lifetime.
Yes, and when we hear it, you know, I hear it when I'm out talking to the community and when I'm promoting programs and fundraising. People will say, oh, I had a piece of art there, you know, when I was in 3rd grade. So it is a really wonderful way of kind of creating community and keeping people close to the museum. Back to the jigsaw puzzle of displaying art, we have these regular shows that we do annually, which are part of usually about 6 to 8 exhibitions a year. So if we do Cumberland Valley Artists, Cumberland Valley Photographers, and the Washington County Public Schools show, that's 3 of about 6 or 8 shows that we do during the year. And curating a show is enormously labor intensive, particularly depending on the scale of the show. So for example, last year we did a permanent collection show that some viewers might have seen called Landscapes and Legends of Norway, and it was pulled from our collection a lot of William Henry Singer's views of Norway and his friends and colleagues who also had painted in Norway. And that was our collection, and we didn't do a book, and we didn't have to borrow anything. And it was still probably a good 9 months of work to, you know, look at, you know, what haven't we seen in storage? Is everything in good enough condition? Does anything need conservation? Do we need to do additional research on the location of this painting? You know, what's the story we're trying to tell with this? Writing labels. So they're enormous work. And a big show that has loans from other museums perhaps to fill out a story. Sometimes you just base it on a couple pieces in your collection. Like we did a Joshua Johnson exhibition a few years ago. We have 2 Joshua Johnson paintings, and so everything else we borrowed. But we did a new book, it was new scholarship. And right now, we're getting ready to open a big exhibition Saturday. It is called Art, Fashion, Symbol, Statement, Tattooing in America, 1960s to Today. And it was about a year and a half curve on planning that one. And when you see the show, you'll be amazed because it is so clearly a lot of work. And we've borrowed some Ed Hardy prints from the San Francisco Fine Arts Museums. We've borrowed some prints of indigenous Americans with tattoos from the Library of Congress and the New York Historical Society. So there are some loans, and we've worked with 18 different contemporary artists to borrow work to show trends in tattooing. And for the Henry Ford Museum, we borrowed an Edison electric pen. This is a fascinating story. Edison invents this pen to use it in early mimeograph machines, so document replication. And tattoo artists who are like poking people's skin with needles, right, look at this Edison's pen and they're like, maybe that could make tattooing easier and more efficient. So we have one of Edison's electric pens on loan from the Henry Ford Museum. So it's just a lot of work, and that's a long way around saying that usually we only have one of our own shows kind of in the docket at a time because they take so many of our resources. So you fill out the rest of your schedule generally with traveling exhibitions. So if people came to see Picasso or children's book illustrations, which we had November to March, 23 to 24, those were touring shows that we contract for. Okay. And that's a great way to bring new things into Hagerstown as well.
So the 6,500 pieces, is that what you said? About how many of those during what I normally see on display?
Yeah, I would guess you're seeing maybe 5 to 8% of our collection.
Wow.
And one of the things that I tell people is, that collection is this incredible, treasure trove / resource for us. So when we did the Picasso print exhibition, we went through our collection and pulled 19th century French and early 20th century prints by, peers of Picasso. So we have a Matisse print that we had out and Fernand Léger. So we often use, we want to have every show we do make sense, and so we often contextualize things further by using our collection. And some of these things, like prints, a lot of people don't know this, but prints are really supposed to only be exposed to light about 25% of the time. So if you have works on paper in a museum, they tell you, to prevent the paper from darkening, to prevent the colors from fading, you let them rest 75% of the time. So if you have prints out, you keep careful track of how long they're out and exposed to light, and you just keep them in storage most of the time. So some things only come out occasionally.
So literally the museum changes itself every day, with the exception of the standing exhibits.
Yeah, perhaps not every day, but with frequency.
Yeah.
With frequency, for sure.
Wow. Talk to us about special events or programs. I know you have, only because I know you're educational director, I see her at the gym most mornings.
Kelly, yes.
But tell us about the special programs that you have at the museum.
Sure, we have a lot of wonderful things happening, particularly for the summer, and I should have actually brought myself a list so that I didn't forget anything. But the tattoo exhibition that I mentioned is opening this Saturday, June 22nd, to the public. And there's a tattoo expo on July 13th, which is going to have, we're collaborating. I know one of the things we were going to talk about was collaborations, and we have a lot of different groups we collaborate with. And for tattoo, we're collaborating with Savage Mountain Punk, and we're going to have bands in the Rose Garden, and there will actually be tattoo demonstrations and kind of alternative lifestyle displays happening, as well as tours of the exhibition and little mini workshops and things going on. And then when the music stops at the museum, it goes over to Hub City Vinyl. So I think it's $18 a person, and I think that's all ages. So $18 a person, I think, gets you 3 more bands over at Hub City Vinyl after our expo ends on July 13th. July 25th, we have a really interesting program. Jerry LaFemina, who is also part of Savage Mountain Punk, he's in the Downstrokes. He is a published poet and writer and sort of cultural critic, and he's going to give a talk on tattooing and the counterculture and the evolution of tattooing from sort of outsiders to mainstream. One of the things about this show is, baby boomers, only about 18% of baby boomers have tattoos. But millennials, who are between, I think it's 27 and 42 right now, over 40% of millennials have tattoos. So we're really hoping, I'm not letting the cat out of the bag by saying, the tattoo show is fascinating and fun, and I have learned so much from staff as we've done this, but we're really trying to get some young people and some different people in the museum, and those demographics help us with that. We also have this summer what we're calling Garden Night at the museum, which I would encourage everybody to come to. They are 3 Fridays. I believe the first one is July 18th, and then there's one in September and one in August. I'm not going to remember the dates offhand, but you can find them on our website. And we keep the museum open till 8, so you can go in and stroll through the galleries, but we have music out in our rose garden. So we say pack a picnic and come and relax and have some time. It's just a wonderful vibe. We piloted it last year, and some people wander in from the park who don't know what's going on. We had other people we had a group from Homewood who took a bus and they brought their own food, and so it's just a great vibe and mixed ages. We had folks from Frederick who'd never been to the museum before who came for Garden Night, so we're very excited about that. And I think the first Garden Night we have music from the Sloan School of Music House Band, and they do blues.
Nice.
Yeah. So
excellent.
And they're helping us. Another collaboration. They are their performance is an in-kind donation that night, and they're helping us line up musicians for some of the other evenings as well.
Excellent. You mentioned that there's more information on your website. What is your web address?
WCMFA.org.
Okay, so Washington County Museum of Fine Arts, WCMFA.org. Excellent. We need to take a break, but we have a lot more questions. I hope you'll stick around for another segment or two. All right, stay with us. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. We're here again with Sarah Hall, Executive Director of the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts. Sarah, thank you for sticking with us for another segment. So let's talk about engagement, community engagement, and education. Talk about some of those types of programs that you offer and some of the partnerships to offer those.
Sure. We have a long-standing partnership with Washington County Public Schools. The exhibition, which I talked about earlier, the Public Schools exhibition, has been going on since 1933. What a lot of people don't know is there's actually a part-time position called the Museum Literacy Coordinator who works with WCPS and the museum to facilitate field trips. So she works with our Director of Education, Kelly Mealy. This is Trish Klein. Some people may know Trish right now. She's our Museum Literacy Coordinator. And they make sure that all of the field trips support curriculum at the school. So one of the things I often say is that, we have an art collection and we do a lot of wonderful art education, but you can use a museum collection to teach just about anything. So you could teach history, you can talk about the Enlightenment, you can talk about the Renaissance, you can talk about foreign languages, you can teach creative writing, you can have kids mixing tempera paint and learning science, with eggs and binders as binders for pigments. So, there's a lot of really, and teaching critical thinking, evaluating, looking at art and talking about it and evaluating it helps develop critical thinking skills. So there's all sorts of ways to use a museum as a resource to support education in all ages. We have been much more actively working with HCC over the last couple of years in terms of internships, and I think they're now developing with Kelly one of their 2+2 programs that's going to specifically focus on art education so that HCC students can intern at the museum and help develop educational programs. The last intern in the spring developed curriculum for homeschool kids. So we're doing a lot of work like that with formal education, supporting homeschooling, etc. We've got a summer camp that's going on this week right now. When we, and I know we'll talk about it at some point, when we expand and have a bigger museum campus, one of our goals is to be able to do more with kids in the summer and do more camps because we'll have more space. But we have 15 kids doing a camp this week that's called Palette Pioneers, and they're working with the collection and the Cumberland Valley Artists Exhibition to learn about different forms of art and different media and ways of expressing. And some of the Cumberland Valley artists are coming in and doing sort of mini workshops with them. It's really wonderful. We also have an adaptive arts camp for children with special needs. Those are kind of mini camps because this is based on the needs of the participants who want shorter days and a little bit more low-key of a museum visit. So those, I think, generally run like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for part of the day. And that program is free. Our regular camp is fee-based, but we offer scholarships to those in need, and we have a scholarship form people can fill out. One thing I do say, and I'll talk to you guys like I talk to my staff, we have been free for 92 years, which is amazing. Go to any city, you're paying an admission fee to go into a museum. I wholeheartedly believe in free admission. I believe the resources of the museum should be accessible to folks without a barrier. On the other hand, we don't have to give everything away that we do.
Absolutely.
So when you come for a tour and when you come for a special program, we need to make some money too.
Well, there's that little glass jar when you walk in the door that's totally voluntary.
It's true. It's true. And that is a really interesting barometer of what's going on at the museum in terms of public response. So for example, we had those wonderful exhibitions this winter, the Picasso prints and the children's book illustrations, and the amount of dollars that people dropped in those voluntary donation boxes was $10,000 higher this year than it was last year.
Wow.
For the same time period. So thank you everyone who was so enjoyed themselves so much at the museum that they dropped some extra money in. And our attendance was higher too, so more people, but also the number of, when you divided it up for a dollar donation per person, that amount was much higher.
Do you do anything with BISFA?
We do. Well, BISFA has some of their, recitals and programs that they do regularly at the museum.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have BISFA students come on field trips too. Lots of the teachers bring their kids over as part of our general partnership with WCPS, for sure. And last year, this was a really interesting thing. Photography students did still life photos with some of the things donated to the treasure sale. So they were learning sort of photo technique and helping us promote the treasure sale as a fundraiser. So yeah, there's we tend to try to we reach out to people, but also when people reach out to us, we try to say yes, which is one of the reasons why we need to expand, because sometimes we have to say no, and we just want to be able to say yes more often.
If you look at your community engagement, is there a particular demographic that you think you would like to reach next? You mentioned the younger kind of Gen X type people. Mm-hmm. What's your next demographic that you really would like to see increase their utilization? And
well, we're
enjoyment?
looking for young families. We're looking for diversity, but I think we are also trying to do more outreach. And if you think about us, we often say we're the only nationally accredited fine arts museum for 65 miles. But if you go north and if you go west, those folks are further from DC. So, we really are I'd like every kid within an hour to be getting to the museum. And so growing our education program and growing our outreach to rural communities is really important.
Do you track, or do you have a way to measure how many of your visitors are from this area versus Frederick, Allegheny County, elsewhere?
Sure. We ask for zip codes when folks come in. Hopefully we're going to convert in the coming, pretty soon as we get into this new fiscal year, to having iPad kiosks where we can voluntarily capture a lot more visitor information. But right now we ask for zip codes, and we get about half of our visitation shares that with us. So we sort of extrapolate that, and we know that about half of our visitors are from within Washington County. If using that number, we know that about 2/3 of our visitors are from within Maryland. But I still think 1/3 of our visitors being from outside of Maryland is pretty amazing.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. Interesting. Well, I think we need to talk about fundraising and expansions, because you've teased it several times here.
I have indeed.
So it's time to talk about it. But before we do that, we're going to take another break. Stay with us. We'll be back to talk more with Sarah Hall from the Washington County Museum of Fine Arts. Welcome back. Well, let's, Sarah, move towards the expansion. I have heard a lot, but I don't know a great deal about it. Tell us what's going on.
Sure. Have you been at any of my presentations? I've been
I have not.
sort of going around the community. I've talked to both Rotaries. I think I've talked to Lions Club. I've talked to the Valley Art Association. I've been to City Council. I presented to the county commissioners. So I've been around. It's not a secret what we've done. In fact, I think there's a little video of me out there talking about it that people can probably find too. But I'll give you some backstory. When I interviewed for this job, which was deep in COVID, it was days of Zooming and intense conversations. And the board and the search committee that I was in conversation with told me that they had acknowledged in the last museum strategic planning process that if the museum was going to grow again, so opens in 1931, and it's this kind of lovely jewel box museum. They added 2 wings in 1949. In 1994, they built the U-shape addition that created our atrium. And then in 2011, the glass roof went on the atrium. So this is one of the things I say is that museums do evolve, they do change. Generational change is really necessary because we're the hidden gem in the park. I want that to just not be hidden. The jewel in the park is fine. But if you stagnate, if you don't change, if you don't keep pace with other cultural organizations in your city, then you're suddenly that quaint little museum in the park instead of a dynamic, relevant place. So during this interview process, they told me, we think we're ready to grow again, but we've realized that it's limited in our current building. That we're sitting on rock in City Park. We have a historic building with limitations on what we can do to it, and so we've thought about perhaps needing to buy another building. Mm-hmm. And this was April of 2020. I started the job in July, and so I was probably interviewing in April. And I was thinking, there's a pandemic going on. We'll see what happens with this museum. And it actually resurfaced much more quickly than I expected, because we started talking about this. We only have one classroom. If you've been to the museum, the 1994 edition has 2 rectangular rooms that kind of face each other. I think in the 1994 plans, they were intended to both be classrooms, but the one became cubicles for employees immediately. Right. Was never used as a classroom. So we have the one classroom and workspace, which means if we have one group in the museum, we have to say no to the next group. Sometimes we'll have a student group in the classroom, and we'll have the Weavers Round Table in the atrium, but then we really have to say no to the next person that calls. And the kids who come, if you may have seen this, but if kids come on a field trip, we literally have no place to put their coats. They are piled in a corner of the atrium. So the facility is just truly there are physical constraints that are, we're not able to do our jobs as well as we could and should. And then there's layered on top of the physical constraints, I'd say, there's the aspirational growth. To, if you read our strategic plan, if you look at the museum's history, there is this frustration with being called a hidden gem. There is a desire, we know we're a wonderful museum, a surprise for people. We want to erase that. We would like to elevate ourselves to being a mid-Atlantic destination. People understand that we're here. We're a regional draw. I mean, that's good for everyone, right? Every dollar spent in tourism becomes 6, right?
100%.
That's the economic development part of this, is just trying to make the museum higher profile, more visible. I often talk about the yin and the yang of community engagement and education and all the things we believe deeply in service to our community, but also the sort of elevating certain things that we do, doing things a little better, a little more theater. Come to the tattoo show, you will see a little more theater in the galleries. Investing in ways of making our experience a little more sophisticated, a little bit more like what you'd expect to see in a larger city in order to become more of a draw for regional tourism. So these are all parts of the need to expand, and so it came up faster than I expected. In conversations, somebody at the board level said, well, there's been a for sale sign on the old Bach Oil building for ages. Let's investigate that. And so we started investigating, and we ended up purchasing, and we immediately stopped calling it the former Bach Oil site. We now call it the Key Street site. And we purchased that in August of 22. So it will be almost 2 years since we've owned that property. Simultaneous to those conversations and those negotiations, we did a master planning process. So we worked with an architecture firm called Schwartz Silver, who are museum planning specialists and architectural specialists. And they looked at the Key Street site. They looked at our building. One of the things I said was, if we can solve all our problems in our existing building, let's please do that, because I'd rather run one building than 4.
Right.
But we can't. We can't do everything we want to do in that one building. And I actually came where I used to work, was a 5.5-acre site with 7 buildings. So this idea of a campus with multiple buildings and different kinds of experiences doesn't frighten me. So I'm talking a lot, Jim, and it's a lot of information. So tell me what you're confused about, or what.
No, you've made things very, very clear. What are the steps in doing this? I
Sure.
know obviously the architectural piece, the planning, the buying the building.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
So the master plan, one thing I will say is every single person that has visited the Key Street site, and I'm happy, call me and ask for a tour if anybody listening wants to know more. But everybody who's been over there has immediately understood how perfectly suited it is to our needs. So there's a main building of 2 stories that is about 11,000 square feet. There are 2 outbuildings, a garage and a stables. And after we went through the master plan and we really defined what our needs were and our limitations, we realized that it would be really easy to create learning spaces over in the main Key Street building. So it is essentially going to be an education center with offices for education personnel, because I really hope that I'm not always talking about Director of Education Kelly Mealy, period, but I'm talking about Director of Education Kelly Mealy and her staff, because
Right.
I would love to have a K-12 specialist and an adult education specialist, and more things happening, a real museum education department rather than a single person. But that Key Street provides space for classrooms and offices for an education department and greater education programming. It also has space where we can create a a room, a community room that will seat 40 to 50 people and have good acoustics and AV and be perfect for our board meetings. We put so many people in the museum library for board meetings. It's really probably not appropriate, the number of people we shoehorn in that little room. So to have a room that can actually, be comfortable for 40 to 50 people with technology, that room would also be available for community use. So if you wanted to take a retreat, an employee retreat, get off site, have lunch somewhere and talk things out, that room would be available. It also could be used potentially for some adult programs and things. So almost, an extra flexible classroom kind of space. Also over at Key Street, we're talking about putting a catering kitchen in the garage. Right now, when I told you the kids drop their jackets on the floor of the atrium, we also don't really have a place for them to eat lunch. Obviously, in good weather, they can do bagged lunches in the park, but most of the time, they don't. Their field trips are only an hour because they go back to school for lunch. So if we can do sort of longer programs with kids that involve an activity plus a tour, if we can have a place for them to have lunch. And so the garage at Key Street will have a catering kitchen and we'll have a space where people can have lunch. That is also a place where in the evenings there could be rental events. There's a cool courtyard there. I could imagine in nice weather, opening the doors up of that garage. We're calling it the event pavilion now, and kind of spilling out into the courtyard and having some nice. That's the party that I want to go to because I'm exhausted raising the money in order to be able to have the party there. But there's also a stables at Key Street, and the first floor of the stables is a really ideal space for contemporary art projects that might. Our galleries are beautiful and very refined, and not every, contemporary artist's work is going to feel right in our main museum building. And so that first floor of the stables is ideal for contemporary art projects. And one of the things in our strategic plan as an aspirational growth was to have a residency program, to be able to invite artists to stay, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months. I don't want to over-define what we call an artist residency. I'd like it to stay really flexible, but we're talking about having the second floor of the stables be an apartment so that we can bring in, and I also say, I'm talking multidisciplinary, so maybe it's a robotics specialist who comes in and does some really high-tech thing. Maybe it's a dancer, maybe it's a writer, maybe it's a potter, maybe it's a painter. But I think the idea of inviting people into our community to make art, to create special work that is shared with the community, and over there on Key Street where we do our education programs, to work with kids and collaborate and bring new ideas into the community is really, really exciting. It's a really exciting part of this project. We're also, I haven't mentioned, is that, when I said I'd rather have one building than four, we did go through this exercise of what are our needs and where can they best be fit. And we did recognize the fact that we do need to do some renovating to our main building. So we're talking about, for example, the space where the Washington County Public School art show is every year is the Grow Gallery. And it's about 2,500 square feet, I think, to do the kinds of shows that I think could really drive regional tourism. We need 4,000 to 5,000 square feet of continuous space. So we're talking about bumping that wall out and making that gallery bigger so we can do some more ambitious exhibitions. And we're talking about creating a new level entrance to the museum. Our entrance is pretty. I know people are very fond of it, but if you were in my shoes and you heard the people, with mobility issues complain about our steps and our ramp is ADA compliant, but it is very long. And I have some museum supporters who are incredibly loyal, generous fans of the museum who tell me that they kind of dread coming to the museum because it's not easy to get in the building. And so that accessibility piece is a really important part of this project too.
Excellent. Excellent.
Where are we now? We're selecting architects for schematic design.
Okay.
We're in the quiet phase of the capital campaign.
So define what the quiet phase
Sure,
looks like.
and if I talk about it, is it really a quiet phase? That's
There
a
you go.
good question. The quiet phase is really when you go to key members of the community that you know have resources and are community supporters, and you get their initial early gifts.
The large dollars.
Right, really, yeah, 6-figure gifts and beyond that, 7-figure gifts to get you started. And the philosophy in fundraising is that in the quiet phase, you get 75 or 80% of the way to your goal. And then when you go to the community in the public phase, everybody comes together to take you over the top and become successful. But we need those early investments and support from key members of our community right now. So if you know somebody who's a big art supporter who's going to be excited about this project, please have them call me. I'd love to talk to them, give them a tour, give them more information. And one of the things, I mean, we're telling people, it is so, I think this project is transformative for the museum and can have a huge impact on this community. It's an exciting project, and it's a good project. And I say good in a kind of almost reverent sense, right? and so we really believe in it. And we're asking folks, in this quiet phase, as we're having conversations with people, to think about doing as much as they can to help us. And we're letting people make gifts over a pledge period. So, we're not saying give us $100,000 at once.
Right now,
we're saying we can space this out over a 5-year period.
Nice.
And certainly we're coming for everyone. so everyone's gonna.
The not so quiet phase.
Yes. And Donna, if you know Donna Rostelli, who is our manager of visitor and volunteer services, and she's on the radio all the time talking about the museum. I love when Donna opens the mail, because I know when there's a check in an envelope, because she squeals with delight. And so it's one of the pleasures of my day is to listen to Donna open the mail.
Excellent. In terms of that campus look, tell us where the Key Street, this new facility, is relative to the museum.
Sure. If you know the museum, when you're driving down Key Street and you go left on Museum Drive, which curves by the lake, and most people park in the upper lot at City Park, right in front of our building. If you chose to park in the lower lot, you would be able to see both buildings. If you're in that lower lot, you can look, back towards the end of Key Street, where Key and Highland meets, right next to Jonathan Hager House, is where the 3 Key Street buildings are, and then our building is up on the other end. And it's maybe a 6-minute walk between the two areas. Eventually, it's not like phase 1 of what we're doing, but eventually looking at the connection between the two buildings and doing some landscaping and maybe sort of mini cultural trail, a walk between the two, an art walk, is in the plans. And also, if you were coming on a field trip, you would probably, your bus would drop you off at Key Street first. There will be a place where it will be easy for buses to pull over. Right now, we put buses in our parking lot, but sometimes we get big groups of school kids, and there might be 3 or 4 school buses, and they usually park on the hill behind the museum and come down that stairway.
Okay, that steep stairway, yep.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay. What does the future hold? Obviously the big expansion, but there's time between now and then. What are the plans?
Sure. We have a really beautiful exhibition of Japanese woodblock prints coming in the fall, and decorative arts, sort of a little bit more of a fully developed show than just the woodblock prints. It's called Floating Beauty, and it's looking at women in the art of Edo period Japan, the way they're depicted. And that's going to be a really fun and beautiful installation. We are working on some big surprises. If I say it, it's not a surprise, I guess. I try to have something, when I'm talking about building visitation in terms of a regional draw. we've looked at, and we also had a market opportunity study we did, and we looked at the museum in the center of, a 60-minute driving radius. And so those of us in a 15-minute driving radius, or maybe a 30-minute driving radius, will go to classes at the museum and do repeat events and things. Those of us out to 45 and 60 minutes are probably coming maybe 3 times a year to see a great show. So to have that drawing power, we're always looking to have something like every 12 to 18 months that we think has big name power. So we are actually looking at, for about a year from now, an exhibition called, and I want to make it very clear, I don't want people to feel like this is bait and switch. It's called Frida Kahlo, an Intimate Portrait. It is not Frida Kahlo paintings, but it is fascinating personal photographs that were from, her dad was a professional photographer. She spent a lot of time with different photographers. So it's this really fascinating, intimate look at her life, her artistic practice, her friendships, her family, and her struggles. So that's the really big show we have coming in about a year. So we have tattoo now, we've got Japanese prints, we've got all the things we do for the community.
You mentioned a mini cultural trail. We obviously have the larger cultural trail, which has gone through some transition here as a result of the baseball stadium, or I'm sorry, the sports stadium. Multi-use stadium. I don't know what they call it nowadays, but there's going to be a lot of good stuff going on there, right? We have the Maryland Theater, which went through a huge renovation, which is, in my mind, the crown jewel of South Potomac Street. We have we have the Arts Council that is right downtown. We talk about the city as an arts and entertainment district. I think we have been very true to that mission. How have those other organizations supported the museum in terms of either getting the word out or providing visitors or whatever the case may be?
Sure. I mean, the Washington County Arts Council is, partners with us very frequently. And in fact, a couple of grants just recently came through to help support our summer camp and also supporting some of the programming related to the tattoo exhibition. So we're talking to each other, we're supporting each other. I'm a huge believer, I say this a lot, more is more. I do not think cultural organizations, the MSO, the Miller House, the Historical Society, I don't think we really need to think of ourselves in competition with each other, because the more we work together, the more we promote each other, the more we develop the cultural audience, and that benefits us all.
Well, and they're different experiences.
Yes. But often it's the same. We have similar people interested in undertaking what we offer. You mentioned the theater. That's something I say often. Is the theater was a $15 million restoration. I think the library was a $14.5 million new building, and quite literally the museum kind of has to keep up. We have to be on par with the other cultural organizations here. We cannot get left behind.
Well, hopefully the theater, the library, BISFA, USMH, all of these amazing things that are going on in our town will bring more visitors in, and this is just another reason for more people to come downtown and spend their money and get an experience that they're not going to get anywhere else.
And there's so much, as you mentioned, we've got the multi-use facility, the baseball team, the stadium, and we've got the new medical school coming. So I think, we're developing the city in different ways that make it a more well-rounded, it improves quality of life for everyone in a lot of different facets.
Well, and it gives, the people that are coming in from out of town that are eating at our restaurants and visiting our museum and going to the theater and doing all of those things, that builds businesses that the locals can then have benefit of.
Absolutely.
Every day of the week. So, excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, Sarah. This has been a very, very interesting conversation. I wish you the best. I want you to come back and tell us when we go from the silent to the...
I will give you an update. And I'm serious. I mean, one of the things about this museum is that we are accessible and friendly, and you can walk in the door and talk to Donna, and they'll tell you if I'm there. So I'm serious about, if you're interested in learning about the Key Street site or having a tour or hearing more from me, just drop by.
Excellent. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook, follow us on X. We hope you will send us your comments and suggestions to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That's feedback@theflipsidetv.com. Most importantly, we hope you'll join us again next week for another round with the Flip Side. Good night.